Hey there, race fans. It's Race Day Top 5 with me, Frank 5. Michigan, the Irish Hills, a beautiful place to enjoy the view, the lakes, but also to enjoy some great racing. And this weekend we had two Michigan-packed races, a doubleheader in the Irish Hills, and one man just absolutely flat-out dominated this doubleheader weekend in Michigan. Number one, Kevin Harvick, basically all those years, the closer, you might as well call him the dominator in 2020, picks up 2 wins at Michigan this weekend, winning the FireKeepers Casino 400 on Saturday over Brad Keselowski, Martin Truex Jr., Ryan Blaney, and Kyle Busch, and today's Consumers Energy 400 over Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex Jr., Kyle Busch, and Joey Logano. What a year it's been for Kevin Harvick. What a weekend for him. I mean, flat out dominant from the start. I mean, all weekend long, him and Ronnie Childers had that number 4 Busch Light Apple Ford tuned up perfectly. Nobody could touch him whatsoever on Saturday's race. He was just flat out dominant, won both stages, and went through a couple of late race restarts against a couple of competitors and held off to get his 5th win of the season, which tied him for 11th on the all-time win list in NASCAR with Lee Petty at 54. And today, with the victory he had over Denny Hamlin, who have been arguably the 2 best cars so far this season, Harvick picked up his 55th career win and puts him 10th on the all-time win list in a tie with one of NASCAR's greats, Rusty Wallace. And now he's only 1 win behind Kyle Busch, who has yet to win the season, and I'll talk about him in just a moment about what happened yesterday. But Harvick just flat out dominated the weekend. Clearly, he is probably the leading contender as the championship favorite for this year. Denny Hamlin is 2nd best, and then Brad Keselowski is probably 3rd best right now. But Kevin Harvick and Ronnie Childers, the chemistry that they've had together ever since they were paired up when Harvick came to Storehouse Racing in 2014, when they were powered by Hendrick cars, and now that they're running Ford cars with Roush Yates engines, they're just such a good team together. Kevin Harvick and Ronnie Childers, they have a great chemistry together. They've always been championship contenders. They've always been in the hunt to be in the championship for or be a strong factor in the playoffs. I mean, Harvick and Childers have only missed the championship for once, and that was in 2016. But almost every year, they're always contending for this championship. And just Kevin Harvick is a matter of time before he gets his 2nd championship in his career. And it could possibly be this year. And unfortunately, unlike the last couple years where he won the Michigan races, he didn't have his son Keelan there to jump in the car with him and celebrate and do donuts and all. So, because of what's going on this year with the coronavirus pandemic. But hopefully soon, Keelan will be back at the track with Dad, and he'll get to ride with Dad when he wins a race post-race. It may not be Michigan. It may be another track. Who knows? It's a good tradition. And Kevin Harvick has certainly been so dominant this season. Number 2, Kyle Busch. All the complaints this year has been about since we came back from racing with no practice and qualifying. He's not been a really big fan of it, and he's literally getting killed by having no practice and qualifying on race weekends. He doesn't really show race-winning speed. But it seemed like this weekend on the radio in Saturday's race and today's race, Kyle Busch was pretty happy with his race car the entire weekend. I mean, he was up front a lot on Saturday's race, had a chance to win on one of the late race restarts where he took the lead from Kevin Harvick, but then he ultimately fell back a couple spots after another late race restart, and he came away with a nice 5th place finish out of it. But on one of those restarts, as mentioned, Kyle Busch was leading, and then turn 4, Kevin Harvick, you can see on the onboard camera, gets towards the rear of Kyle Busch's left rear quarter panel and gets him a little bit loose, and he didn't even make contact with him whatsoever. I mean, you could tell on the onboard camera, the right front fender never touched the left rear quarter panel of Kyle Busch. I mean, some other people say, oh, he touched him, but if you listen on the onboard camera, if you would hear a slight nudge against the guy on your outside in the rear quarter panel, you would hear it, and you didn't hear it whatsoever. So it was just fair racing between Harvick and Kyle Busch for the most part. It was obviously late race victory on the line. And today he had another solid performance, getting a top 5 finish. It was a very good weekend for Kyle Busch, and he admitted he's not really a big fan of Michigan, even though he's won here in the past, but that was a couple of years ago. He hasn't really been a big fan of Michigan because it hasn't really been nice to him as far as results. But this weekend, 2 solid top 5 results is good way to build momentum for Kyle Busch. And remember, he still only has 1 playoff point this season. That was the stage win a couple weeks ago in Kansas. So Kyle Busch might be closing on to getting that first win of the season, but it's only going to be a matter of time when he gets to victory circle. And it's not a matter of if he's going to win, it's a matter of when he's going to win. It might be fairly soon again, maybe the next race or the following race, but Kyle Busch, a solid weekend in Michigan with no complaints whatsoever. I'm sure it makes him a happy Kyle Busch. Number 3, Penske Drama on day 2 at Michigan. Both the Penske cars, Ryan Blaney and Brad Keselowski, off of a new contract extension with Penske after winning last weekend in New Hampshire. They were just so strong all day long in this race. They were clearly one of the best Fords. Brad Keselowski probably had a Ford capable of challenging Kevin Harvick for the lead. But on one of the early stages of the final stage, Brad Keselowski makes a move to the inside on turn 1 underneath of his teammate Ryan Blaney, and his left side tires gets on the left side apron, the yellow apron on the bottom of the racetrack, and he gets him a little bit loose and knocks himself up into his teammate Ryan Blaney, sending them both in the wall and out of the race. It's unfortunate because both guys look to be really competitive, and of course Brad Keselowski, he's from Rochester Hills, Michigan. He's a Michigan native. He has never won here at his home track, and he had the chance to win today because he finished second yesterday with a good result. He had a car that could do it today, but he mentioned that before he went into turn 1 and tried to go to the inside of Blaney and got loose and took both of them out, he mentioned that the Kevin Harvick car pushed him a little further down the front straightaway, a couple miles an hour faster, and he didn't anticipate carrying so much speed heading into turn 1 that he'd get to the bottom and maybe get a little bit loose, killing his momentum and sending them up into his team and taking them both out. So Brad took the blame for it, but, it's kind of a racing deal, and, I don't think he meant to do it to Blaney. Obviously, the car just got loose, and it wasn't his fault. As far as doing it intentionally, it was just an accident. It's one of those racing deals. You can't control the balance of your car, even though you're wheeling it as hard as you can, especially with this low horsepower package that we have on these bigger tracks, such as Michigan and California and Charlotte and those tracks. There's nothing you could do much about it, but Brad Keselowski took the blame for it, and they'll press on, obviously, with the new extension he signed for next year, 2021. It's only a 1-year deal for Brad Keselowski, and of course, Blaney has a multi-year deal. So they'll both figure this out, and they'll both be on good terms the next couple of days. They shouldn't, be mad at each other for a week over this incident. It's a racing deal. We all know that. Number 4, a new interesting rule was put into place for NASCAR this weekend, and it's been put into place for the rest of the season, excluding the super speedways and the road course races that we have up and coming. The choose rule. This was introduced at the All-Star race at Bristol, where drivers, no matter what position you were in, you could choose the top lane or the bottom lane by passing an orange arrow with an orange box in the middle. It's like a cone in the middle of the racetrack you see on those dirt races. If you had to be on the right side of the cone, if you're going to be starting on the outside, and if you want to choose the bottom lane, you got to be on the inside of the orange arrow. And if anybody touches the orange box while trying to change lanes, you're automatically drop to the rear of the field on the restart, because that's a violation of the rules with this cone, this choose rule. Basically it was put into place for the All-Star race to try and change things up and make it a little bit more exciting. And NASCAR decided for this weekend in Michigan and from the rest of the season, excluding super speedways and the road courses, let's put this choose rule in and see how exciting it makes these restarts and this racing. And I gotta say, they did a really nice job. Everybody chose different lanes that felt good for their cars, or obviously wanted to try and see which lane benefited them, maybe versus the previous restart if they didn't do so well up on the top or the bottom. And a lot of the drivers and a couple of the fans as well on social media approved of this rule that NASCAR put in. It was very exciting, and it made for some exciting restarts, especially these restarts in Michigan are just absolutely bonkers. They are fun to watch. And the restarts with the choose rule made it that much entertaining. And all the car drivers, they all just enjoyed being in lanes that they wanted to be in, top or bottom. It was just, it provided a lot of drama in these restarts, specifically Saturday's race, when a lot of guys chose the bottom versus the top, or guys chose the top versus the bottom, were able to hold their track position. It provided for some exciting racing, and we'll see how this goes in the next couple of weeks when we go to the next non-road course super speedway track, which would be Dover on August 22nd and August 23rd. That should be an interesting weekend and an interesting way to see how guys choose their lanes on the restarts. And number 5, silly season drama that's been going on this weekend that I have to get into as one of my topics in this video. One of the first topics I have to get into is Bubba Wallace is close to a contract extension, possibly with Richard Petty Motorsports, which would include a slight ownership within the team, being able to share the team with Richard Petty. But Bubba Wallace has also received offers from other teams as well, including Chip Ganassi Racing, probably the 42 car, because it's guaranteed, because he came back this year due to the circumstances with what Kyle Larson, did. Matt Kenseth will most likely retire at the end of the season, and that could open the door for somebody like Bubba Wallace. But it looks like he probably will stay with the 43. He hinted after a nice top 10 result he had yesterday that a big deal is possibly coming. That big deal could be with Richard Petty Motorsports, or he might change his mind and go to another team. Who knows? That's the magic of silly season. That's the unpredictability that we have of it. Now, this next bit of news I have to get in is kind of a little bit sad for one of the NASCAR teams. Levine Family Racing, the number 95 team that is currently being driven by Christopher Bell, has announced that at the conclusion of the 2020 NASCAR Cup Series season, they will shut down the organization and they will sell all their assets, their cars, engines, back to Joe Gibbs, which supplies the team with cars and engines, and they will sell their charter to somebody else. According to reports, it's Spire Motorsports, which owns the 77 car. They may own a second team, possibly. That's not been confirmed yet about who bought the charter from Levine Family Racing, but we'll find out as the season goes on. But it's kind of sad, and because of the coronavirus pandemic this year, and it's kind of affected our economy, it's affected the economy of the Cup teams, and Levine Family Racing is not a big, heavily funded team like Joe Gibbs Racing or Hendrick Motorsports or Stewart-Haas Racing or Team Penske. They're a low-budget team. They've just been getting Gibbs equipment the last couple of years. Of course, last year when Matt DiBenedetto was the driver and almost won the night race at Bristol with a car that Levine Family Racing purchased from Joe Gibbs. The cost to buy Gibbs equipment over the years, particularly when you looked at what happened to Furniture Racing, it increased, and they couldn't afford to have the money to pay for all that, so they have to close down doors, Sally, and it's tough, but that's the type of economy that we currently are in right now, and I feel so bad for Levine Family Racing. But Christopher Bell fans, keep your hopes up, because it looks like you are getting a ride for next year, and that's where it comes to this news. Eric Jones and Joe Gibbs Racing will not be together in 2021. Eric Jones and Gibbs have parted ways after the 2020 season, which kind of sucks for Eric Jones, but we've kind of had a lot of discussions back and forth between who's going to be in the 20 and 2021, because Eric Jones, he's a good kid, and he has 2 Cup wins in the July race at Daytona in 2018 and last year the Southern 500. But Eric Jones isn't really consistent, and I don't know if it's because of the cars, maybe because the 20 has been kind of described as the weak link of Gibbs right now, when your 3 other teammates are championship contenders and 2 of them are Cup champions. One of them is determined to win his first Cup championship, and you all know who I'm talking about. Eric Jones has been kind of looked at as the weak link of Gibbs, and putting Christopher Bell in may put a little bit of a spark into that 20 camp, and they may be more competitive with Christopher Bell paired up with Chris Gale, or they may replace him with his crew chief Jason Ratcliffe, who is on the pit box of the 95 team. So we don't know. All we know is Eric Jones won't be back in the 20 car next year. Now, what does that mean for his future? He has a couple opportunities out there. Obviously, the 42 is open in case Bubba Wallace doesn't go there, or rumor has it he could be in the 48 car after Jimmy Johnson retires after this year. I don't think that's going to happen, to be honest with you, because there's rumors also about Alex Bowman may go to the 48, and they shut the 88 car down because they've been dealing with a lot of sponsorship loss, considering Nationwide left at the end of last year. Or Noah Gragson, considering how good he's been in the Xfinity Series this year, he might propel to the Cup Series next year. We don't know. That's the unpredictability, again, of silly season. So we'll find out where all 3 of those guys land next year, and there's other deals going on as well and other drivers, but we shall see what happens, and we will find out who will be where in 2021. Finally, driver recap for the weekend. Chase Elliott, solid results this weekend. A 7th place finish yesterday. On one of the late restarts, he restarted at the bottom and actually got ahead of Kevin Harvick and looked like he was going to finally get that win in Michigan, because you remember his first couple of trips to Michigan. Chase Elliott almost won all 3 of those races, but finishing second. 2 of them to Kyle Larson, 1 of them the first time to Joey Logano. Chase Elliott has one of the best average finishes of anybody in the Cup Series right now at this track. He only has 1 finish outside the top 10, and that was the 2019 spring, early summer race last year. And he had a nice restart in the first race yesterday, but he lost it again on the next restart, and he had to settle for 7th place finish, which is a good result. Today, at 9th place finish for the 9 car. It was a good, weekend for the 9 team, and they can carry that momentum going forward. So that is it from the Irish Hills in Michigan, and up next is a road course race. And sadly, it's not Watkins Glen, because they're not going to race there this year because of the pandemic, obviously, and New York won't open up to sports for the time being. so it kind of sucks. But we will still go road course racing next weekend in the World Center of Racing at Daytona. Yes, Daytona, that plays host to the 24 Hours of Daytona, the famous WeatherTech Sports Car Championship opener. The road course section will play host to its first ever NASCAR Cup Xfinity Truck Series weekend there, and it should be very interesting. Look for people like Chase Elliott, like Kevin Harvick, like Denny Hamlin, and Martin Truex Jr. to be up front battling for the win in this new circuit that we are racing at this weekend. So what will happen? We don't know. We won't have any practice or qualifying, so we won't know what happens. But I guarantee you it will be an unpredictable, exciting race. Get ready, because this is going to be an interesting wild card race. Because in a couple weeks, we're going to go back there for the Coke 0400 under the lights, and it's going to be wild with 3-4 wide racing at 200 miles an hour. These next few weeks at Daytona on the road course and the Super Speedway will be a lot of fun, and we shall see what happens. So subscribe, like, congrats to Kevin Harvick on winning both Michigan races this weekend. And until then, have a nice week.